Welcome to TalkNorth.com. Thanks to our longtime producer, Brandon Morton. Please download before you listen. If you'd like to advertise with us, you can reach us at talknorthpodcast@gmail.com. And please follow us on Twitter at TalkNorthPod. Two promo codes to be aware of. Bitesquad.com. Use the promo code TalkNorth to get your first delivery free. And go to SodaStick.com, the great local apparel company. Use the promo code YouBetcha to get free shipping on any sized order. We have news to discuss here on Roy Smalley's Chin Music. We have an Odorizzi signing, which is really interesting. We have Rocco Baldelli being named the American League Manager of the Year, and Derek Falvine and Thad Levine getting contract extensions. We're going to hit the big stuff today. Again, this is Roy Smalley's Chin Music. This is part of the TalkNorth.com podcast network. Roy is, of course, the former Twins star, former Yankees star, now FSN contributor and analyst. I'm Jim Suhan from the Star Tribune. Please follow us on Twitter at TalkNorthPod. Thanks to our producer, Brandon Morton. And thank you to our sponsors, Berry Coffee, berrycoffee.com, Tony Hoaglund, Hoaglund, your State Farm agent, and Bitesquad, bitesquad.com. The promo code is TalkNorth. I guess let's start with Rocco. Rocco wins it fairly narrowly over Aaron Boone. And we kind of discussed this last week. I think Aaron Boone did a good job, obviously, and the Yankees did have significant injuries. My thinking all along, and I think I mentioned it in August, hey, Rocco's going to win the American League Manager of the Year award. My thinking is Rocco deserved it more than Aaron because the baseline for Yankee victories is what, 90, 95? I mean, if the Yankees win 88 games, it's a bad year. Twins baseline for victories is like 60 or 70. I mean, if the Twins have a bad year, they lose 100-plus games. So I just felt like Rocco, and dealing with his own series of injuries and bullpen issues, I just thought he had more to overcome than Aaron Boone.
I don't think there's any question about that. I agree with you wholeheartedly. We talked about this a little bit last week. Aaron Boone, were it not for what the Twins did this year, what Rocco did this year, Aaron Boone would be runaway manager of the year in my view, because of they had big people hurt, and I have to tell you, I mean, not to take anything away from Aaron Boone at all. I agree with your baseline number for the Yankees, except when your best starting pitcher, arguably Severino, goes down for a long time, and you have J. Happ struggle. And you lose Stanton, and you lose Judge for a while. I mean, these weren't marginal guys, and they were really, really important. And the way they performed in the absence of those guys until those guys got back in the lineup was really impressive. I just felt like from even given that, from where the Yankees were in 2018 to the 2019 performance compared to where the Twins were in 2018 and then the 2019 performance. I just thought that the Twins season was remarkable, and I think the vote reflected barely more remarkable than what Aaron Boone did. So as we said last week, I mean, I said Rocco's manager of the year, and felt that strongly, and I'm glad that the voters felt that way too, for the most part.
What I wanted to get into with you, you played for Gene Mauch, great manager. Tom Kelly, who won 2 World Series in 5 years with teams that were very good, but that weren't teams you looked at that's in the spring of each year and said, oh boy, they got a chance to win the World Series. So you played for some really good managers. Do you think what is required of a manager in 2019 is the same or different from what was required of a good manager when you played?
I think it's different, but it's different by degrees and nuance. Actually, I mean, if you'll forgive that, I think that the great managers that I played for, Gene being number one in my book, Tom Kelly, Billy Martin, whom I played for twice. those guys were great with their players. Besides being great tacticians, they were good with their players. Tony La Russa, I played for a little while. He was a very good communicator, but not to the degree that it appears that managers have to be today in terms of making sure that everybody feels good about themselves at all times.
Yeah, that is different.
It's different, and it's not that the good managers in the past that I've mentioned, for example, that I've experienced, were totally ignoring of how guys were feeling, but the intensity of time and effort spent on what the manager's personality ought to be to match the players that he had was not anywhere close to what it is. And I think we saw what it is now, and I think we saw the best example of that with Rocco this year. I mean, if you read the actual lines and in between the lines, but what everybody says about Rocco, what keeps coming up is he created an environment not only for the team but for each individual player. He spent a lot of time and effort making everybody feel good and comfortable about the team and about themselves, and that degree of effort and intensity is different now than it was then.
I'm also reminded, Jack McKeon stepped in and won a World Series with the Marlins, and I was told by people who cover the team and people on that team that McKeon never left his office. He never talked to players unless he had to. He just ran the team. And I think, really, he never did anything other than just write out the lineup card, make the decisions, kept the communication to a minimum, and it worked. And that wasn't that long ago, but I don't think that could work today.
Best example of that was actually uttered by Billy Slick Gardner, who had managed the Twins in 81 and 82, and Slick's response when a media person asked him about communication to and motivation of players, he said, "Well, communication is a lineup card and motivation is a contract. So, is there anything else?" I mean, that was it. Here's how I communicate with players: check the lineup card, see if you're in there. Right. And how am I supposed to motivate players? Well, if they don't get motivated by trying to be a better player and make more money for themselves and their family, what am I going to do about it? It was that kind of attitude that that was pervasive as recently as into the mid '80s for sure.
Oh, absolutely. So I think Rocco won it. I think he won it for all the reasons we're citing right now. And the interesting thing is, Roy, in the modern age of hyper analytics, it used to be a big staple of the baseball writing profession to just pick on every move a manager made, or at least not pick on, analyze every move a manager made. Okay, why did he do that? And I don't know about everybody else, but I've kind of gotten away from that. And in part, I've gotten away from that because I know they have all the numbers. I know they have really good reasons for doing what they do, even if it doesn't work out, or even if it doesn't, even if it doesn't seem logical on the outside. You just know that they have every possible number they have to factor into their decision.
Well, true, and I think the funny part, one of the funny parts of this analytics environment now is that not everybody on any level, whether it's the managers, the players, the front office, the media and the media, fans, we're not quite totally there yet with the analytics because we have given ourselves over to the idea of the analytics. Right? There's no second guessing of any decisions now, because what are we going to say to the data? And everybody has, the great excuse now is, hey, I made that move because the numbers told me so. And so it's kind of interesting. If we go back to the managers that we talked about, there wasn't the same kind of analytical data for Gene Mauch or Tony La Russa or Billy Martin. Those guys had Tom Kelly. Those guys had a lot of that stuff in their heads, just because they paid attention and they understood the game and they watched. And if you gave them, those guys that I just mentioned, if you gave them all the analytics that today's managers have, none of the four of them would ever do things absolutely by that data book if their gut told them that they needed to do something else. And I think that's a big difference too. Analytics have taken over, or at least, what's the word, obviated, taken away, cut off at the knees, the ability to say, well, was that a good move or not? Because they have this great excuse. I'm not saying that's not correct, but right now, the rest of us, I think, we're all going, well, what are we going to say to that?
Right. Yeah. And listen, there's still moves I might disagree with, but I just think there's so much evidence on the side of the people making the decision now. It's a harder fight to pick where, frankly, I thought Gardy sometimes would make just purely emotional moves, and you can argue with an emotional move. It's hard to argue with a rational move, but your point is really well taken. Hey, let's thank Berry Coffee, berrycoffee.com. Now, I live right near a coffee shop, a chain coffee shop, and you know what? They make good coffee. It's their business. They have good beans. They have good equipment. They make good coffee. It's a good place to go sit and work if you need to get some work done. What has amazed me about getting a machine from Berry Coffee and getting my beans from Berry Coffee, where they are just incredibly fresh, they won't send them to you until they have a fresh batch, is I'm an idiot and I'm terrible with machines, I'm terrible with technology, and I can push a button in my kitchen and get better coffee that I can get if I go over to the drive-thru or the coffee shop and give them $5 for a cup of coffee, which is what it costs. It's an amazing thing for me to actually be able to make better coffee, because I can't make a better pizza than the pizzeria, but I can make better coffee than the coffee shop because I work with Berry Coffee. So I really highly recommend, whether you want to get a single serving thing or espresso, cappuccino, straight coffee, whether you any level of technology, you can get it at berrycoffee.com. Go check it out. Push the equipment button, and you'll see. It's a website. You can figure out how to look through a website. You'll find great stuff there, and I really enjoy my morning cup of coffee because of Berry Coffee. Let's go to the Jake Odorizzi signing. They made a qualifying offer to him, which meant he had the choice. He could accept a one-year deal for $17.8 million, or he could become a free agent, and the Twins would get draft pick compensation, a first-round, kind of a sandwich pick, if he left. And we know what happened last winter. Free agents with that deal, with compensation picks attached to them, did not do well in free agency. So I guess I still assumed Odorizzi would want to go sign a 3-4 year deal based on having a really good season. But he accepts the qualifying offer, and I think that's a really fascinating look into how that draft pick compensation affects free agents.
Yeah, it really is, and it's interesting from both sides. So you look at it from the Twins' standpoint, and they say, probably $18 million that we're going to spend is on Odorizzi is better than saving the $18 million and getting a draft pick. I think that's interesting. It shows I think the regard they have for Jake, but it also shows what's probably available at what price out there, either especially through free agency, but to some degree, via the trade route, and what you'd have to give up and then pay somebody, when you trade. So taking all those things into account from the Twins' standpoint, they looked at that and said, okay, whether Odorizzi is number one or number 5, he's a big league starter, and this is a reasonable price, an ultimate, eminently reasonable price to pay, for a big league starter. And from Odorizzi's standpoint, I think your point's exactly the right one. He's looking at that, at the environment out there, and how free agents just didn't do an awful lot better, and in some cases a lot worse by holding out and demanding that they get paid